Hello and welcome back to BTN TV. I am Michael Baker, executive editor with the BTN Group, and I'm now joined by Bex Deadman, who is independent travel risk consultant.
Hi,
Thank,
Michael. How are you doing?
Great, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
All
I'm very
right.
grateful.
So, as you're on the ground, in the
A
midst of
little.
yes, what are some of the key trends you're seeing in risk management today?
So, there's obviously the new standard that came out a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
ISO 31030, which weirdly is one of the fastest growing standards as far as interest is concerned, which isn't surprising really when we look in this space. But what's interesting is it's coming from the ground.
Mhm.
It's coming from travelers. For the kind of first time, we're really hearing what they've got to say. And ultimately, they're the ones that are affected by every decision we make, every policy we write. And they're the ones doing the traveling, which in 2023 is no mean feat, right? Travel is a
Mhm.
lot more difficult and a lot more demanding on people than it used to be. So this seems to be a topic that is is coming up through the ranks, but being led by the travellers at the moment, which I find really interesting.
Mhm.
And in fact, it was one of your journalists out in the States that were talking around that as well, because they've done some surveys and they were seeing the same sort of feedback, which is what I'm getting. So that's really interesting for me.
And what's kind of the sentiment that these travelers are expressing? Do they not feel safe or protected when they're traveling? Do they not feel like there's a network in place? What are their concerns?
A lot of those
Hmm.
things. So I think obviously it depends on the organisation, right? And so many organisations, those that have been travelling to high risk countries or those perhaps doing high risk activities, are on this. They've done it well. They've got some good stuff in place as far as that's concerned. But this whole point is it's all travel. And that's a bit that we're quite scared to deal with as a
Hmm.
travel industry, but also as travel managers, because it's huge. Like, how do you begin to even deal with this? How do you do a risk assessment for every trip when you're doing 24, 25, 30,000 trips a year? And that's kind of the issue. But from the traveler's perspective, there was kind of a given that they assumed that some of this stuff was already taken care of, you know. So the point is people are fine until something goes wrong. When something goes wrong, what do they
Hmm.
do then? And that's when most of the systems that we've got in place fail us, unfortunately. COVID was a real eye opener for that. We've come back from the pandemic stronger than we were as far as travel is concerned. But what we seem to have forgotten is to have that conversation with our travellers and find out how they're feeling. So generally, maybe they don't want to travel like they used to travel. Maybe they are unsure about the destination they went to. Maybe they just feel the world is an unsafer place now and they're looking back at their corporate to say, well, I'll go, but what are you going to do and how does this all work? And that's the bit I think a lot of corporates are struggling to respond to at the moment.
And what about kind of the individualization of risk management? Because obviously, women travelers are going to have different risk levels in certain types of travel than male travelers will. LGBTQ travelers are going to have their own certain risk. Travelers with
Yeah,
disabilities, different races. So how do you kind of
do it all.
individualize it while having still kind of a broad risk management policy?
And I think this is the issue. So this is the worry that people sort of say, how can I get to know all of my travelers?
Mhm.
And for those of us, and I'll do a little shout out to Bruce McIndoe now, because he talks about people risk management all the time. And we're very full on this. It's like you have to find a way to know who your travelers are. You can't be sending somebody from the LGBTQI community to a country that has got issues and has got different ways of thinking about that and not warn them that there's a situation there. That is going to come back on you if something goes wrong. In the same way with female travelers, there was something on LinkedIn recently. A girl got kicked out of a property of a hotel because they were overbooked, and she was just stranded in
Mm.
London at 1 o'clock in the morning. Like this stuff just kind of isn't acceptable for us to do that anymore. So we need to find ways of putting a structure together that allows. This is the thing: we're all adults,
Mhm.
right? I know if I travel, I'm a woman, and I know the things that I need to look out for. But what I need is my company to point me in the right direction and give me a source that I can trust.
Mhm.
So actually, it's a kind of cover all for all, but make sure that those people that need to access it can. So we're sort of treating people as individuals, but allowing them to find the information themselves. But at the moment, what most companies are doing is kind of giving you a 25-page email with all the different things that could happen
Right.
in that
Mhm.
country. You know we're not reading it because you're too busy trying to get the rest of the work done. But by combining it with training, people know if a bit of training is going to affect them. Asking the question, is your personal life going to affect you on this trip?
Hmm. And it really behooves everyone to, I mean, as a member of the LGBT community myself, if I'm traveling in a country where, you know, s- uh,
You're
there's
right,
a different
sir.
attitudes, but
Yeah.
I'm traveling with someone who it, I might be keeping things
Yeah.
more quiet than usual.
Yeah.
It would behoove that person I'm traveling with to know this as well. So it's not just those individual travelers. Everyone really has to be up to date on everything. So,
No,
mhm,
absolutely. And to not, I always think this about from the racial
mhm,
piece as well. So you could be, everyone's from London, but we have different coloured skin. You're going on a work trip, and the one person from African origin or Asian origin gets pulled aside in the US
mhm,
when they're, from. How embarrassing is that
right,
in front of all their colleagues if they don't know that that's going to happen because they've never been on that trip? We do know that this stuff is going to happen, and there is a way of proactively informing and telling your travellers without, I'm going to use the word outing, but that's not
right.
what I mean, but
It's
without outing them in their situation. Because if you found somewhere online that you could go to within your organisation that answers the questions for your community, you'd do it, right?
mhm,
But they're not providing that information at the moment. And actually, as we're still in Pride Week, Pride Month, let's just mention
yes,
this just quickly. Obviously, we all go rainbow mad in June, and I just, as an ally of the LGBTQI community, as I have been forever, I promise you I'm trying to make your travelling world safer, and that's what I'm doing throughout the whole year, not just shining stuff out for June,
that's
right?
right.
And that's what I keep hearing, like that's the feedback I'm hearing from that community. Make it safe for us to do what we want to do and allow things to be like everything else. And yeah, that's what I think we're trying to do with travel risk, and lots of other things in that field.
All right, excellent. Well, there's a lot more we can talk about travel risk,
I
but I also wanted to
know.
get some time where we could talk about,
Those
yes,
commercials.
commercial models. Yes, as I know you've done a lot of work there. So in the midst of COVID, there was some rumblings about how we're going to see a grand shift away from transaction models
And
to more
subscription
subscriptions.
fees,
Yes, and
yeah.
it hasn't happened. Why not?
Why has it happened? I don't know, because no one's speaking to me to consult about this. I'm open for consulting. No, I think it's a worry for travel management companies to get their head around it. I think the last time you and I spoke, CWT were rumbling about
Yes,
putting
yes.
something out, and I haven't heard anything since. Have
They
you?
they have continued. They've kind of adopted the model a little bit, but it is something they are still pushing. Yes.
Okay, so they are. Okay, that's really good. So I don't think it's going anywhere quick enough. I think there's a whole kind of movement that needs to happen where we actually start managing our travel programs, but as a whole. So taking not just the booking piece, but that whole piece of a travel program. Once you start doing that, then actually that's when the commercial models kind of work in a slightly different way. So I think I spoke to you about this earlier in the year. I ran a tender earlier this year for a travel risk management solution, which included a TMC. They weren't all of it, they were part of it. So actually offering a traditional transaction fee model in that RFP would have been wrong because the 8 other suppliers that were nothing to do with TMCs don't charge like that. They charge as a subscription fee or as a business. And it was very difficult to get the TMCs to move into that. So I think it leads to a bigger question, Michael. How do we charge or how do we put a value proposition against the work that we do when all we're interested in is the transaction itself? How do we as an industry travel less? When actually as an industry we're all making money from the transaction. There's a whole conversation that needs to happen here, and it's kind of bigger than all of us. And it feels like actually everyone just wanted to recover from COVID. As far as the travel companies are concerned, let's just get people traveling. Let's lift some of those losses and let's make that as easy as possible, in the hope that in a couple of years' time we'll review it and look at it. We won't, and it's likely to kind of carry on as it is. So what I do hear though, from the corporate side, for what it's worth, they are looking for new models, and they continue to look for new models. In the same way that those travellers are asking about travel risk management, unfortunately the industry is pushing back and saying it's not happening. We have to start really listening to what people are saying, I think.
Absolutely, and it all ties together because risk management is a part of that.
Oh, for me,
that
like
service. So it's a
big umbrella, and it's a lot easier to charge a subscription fee. If as a TMC you can say I'm providing all of this as well. So yeah, there's definitely big options there.
all right. Well, excellent. Well, Bex, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a fascinating conversation as always.
Thank you.
All right, and once
See
again,
you soon.
yes, absolutely. And once again, I'm Michael Baker with the executive editor with the BTN Group, and thank you for joining us for BTN TV.